So magazine cover category includes the best use of photography on a magazine cover. Any questions there?
Nope. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah. And a reminder, if anyone wants like a caption or description read, just mention that to Julian and Lizzie.
Could we get a caption for this?
Yes, I can do that. All right, here we go. For this page, we have Sergeant Armando Salazar and Corporal Alvaro Heredia from, I can't read that part because it gives out information of the artist, during a walk over lava slugs to measure the temperature of lava flows and take sample to help Geological and Mining Institute of Spain from Spanish National Research Council. The last event marks the first time this volcano has erupted since 1971. The island of La Palma is part of the Spanish Canary Islands and is one of the most volcanically active zones in the archipelago with a population of 85,000 people. The latest eruption was preceded by several earthquake swarms. More than 7,000 villagers have been evacuated and more than 1,000 homes have been destroyed.
Thank you. Could we get caption for this?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. The full cover of issue 1 of the Curious Society. This is a wrap around cover. The spine of the magazine is in the middle and the images on either side are flaps, which are folded inside. The images on the cover were made by Carol Guzzi and show events at the US Capitol on January 6, 2021 and January 22nd, 2021.
Okay.
And the rest are just names of people who were helped to make this cover.
One thing that, sorry, if you don't mind returning to that one, I wanted to point out that it appears it's like a photo illustration, right?
Yeah.
I was wondering if it maybe was a picture of a billboard or something, you know, or like maybe Carol photographed something that was existing somewhere, but I'm just guessing because I honestly don't know. So.
Oh, it looks like someone's holding. Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I think it's 3 images stitched together. So it's a person holding a mask, right, in the middle. But then there's 2 other images on the side because if you look in the middle, that's the spine, right? They go like
right. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, thanks for, I think because it's so small too on my screen at the moment, it's a little hard to tell. That definitely clarifies things then.
So question about this one now, because the category is cover. So because this is a wraparound that goes around the spine, how much of this do we consider? Just the front cover or all of it?
It's a good question.
What do you guys think?
I mean, I feel like we could consider all of it, but you know, I'm sure other people would disagree. So
yeah, I don't know. I feel like I don't want to get not necessarily nitpicky, but I feel like it's hard for me to just kind of look at like the middle that is the cover that's split and not consider the other 2 images on the inner flap.
Right.
But technically those are not cover images.
I know.
Yeah, I wonder, do we have any other submissions that work in the same way where it's a wraparound cover?
I'm not sure. So why don't we table that thought and go through the rest and we can talk about it as a whole.
Sounds good.
Cool.
caption for this, please?
Of course. Okay. Image description. 11 photographers and one writer on how the pandemic altered lives in the LGBTQ plus community. And that is the end of caption.
Okay, thank you. I have a question now. Are we gonna just do like a quick pass through everything and then come back around and start to really discuss the covers?
I was trying to mull this over while as we started and also before, but what do you think of if something has more than, if a category has more than 3 submissions, to go through them one by one like we have been doing and start to vote some of them in or out? And then when we get to a certain number, like 3 to 5, we can have a conversation, start to comment on each of them.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea at all.
Okay.
Sure.
I'm also open to other ways of doing this. If y'all have
No,
judged other
I
ways.
think that makes sense, just
Yeah.
to get down to the heart of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Another quick note while we're looking at these too is how to keep track of some of the submissions. I think that's going to get a little tricky soon. I wanted to note that the first few letters, if you look up at the top of the page by the X where there's like the file name basically near the stars, the first few letters and numbers BOP02 are the same on every submission, but I believe the next 4 digits are unique to it. So that 0512 that we see here, that's unique to this submission. So I encourage you, if you're like taking notes or if you can take notes, maybe we can start using those to refer to these. Does that work for everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Awesome. Okay, so for the cover to start, we'll go ahead and go through each of them and then go through each of them again and start to vote in or out, basically. And we can do that either on Slack. We could do that real quick in person. And I think that'll be pretty straightforward because we have 3 people, so there will be a tiebreaker. I also quickly wanted to note while we're doing like admin stuff to our conversation earlier, because it was like off the recording, but we did decide to switch categories to start with magazines because Shaminder has worked with the Times and worked on some of those front pages. And so we wanted to make sure he had the opportunity to recuse himself and only chime in on stories that he hadn't worked on. And we'll continue the conversation to if it's a Times submission that you didn't work on. But I think that was a pretty clear line to have you jump out of that conversation, and we'll return to that when Emily joins the crew later. Cool. Just wanted to say that for posterity for like the 5 people who are maybe going to watch this in the future. Awesome. Okay, let's jump back into it.
Could we get caption for this?
Yes. Okay. Image description. Exodus, how mass migration and its ripple effects are appending lives across Latin America, a story in photographs.
Can't quite read what the caption in the bottom right corner is. Can someone read that?
I can't read it either.
Yeah, we need to zoom in.
Yeah, let me get on that. I'm trying to see if I can zoom in on my screen.
We're all in this together.
We are.
Yeah. Let's see.
I can kind of see it here. Maria and her name kind of blends into the page here. At a funeral for her cousin, a migrant in Mexico. That's omitting a lot of words, but that's kind of the best I can do.
Yeah, migrant killed in Mexico is what it, yeah.
I should also just say that Nicola was one of the Eugene Smith grant winners, and I'm on the board of the organization, but it doesn't affect my, vote at all. So
Thanks for, the transparency
just,
and I don't know why you all have to be so accomplished here, but I guess we'll work with that. Thank you. Yeah, I think that makes sense since we're judging based on the impact of the magazine cover and such.
Yeah, and I had no idea it was magazine covers.
Is there any captioning information for this?
Yes, there is. Image description. January 2021, National Geographic 2020 year in review. The statue of Robert E. Lee is transformed into a Black Lives Matter monument with a projection of George Floyd's portrait. It's time for the healing to start, tweeted Liv Arstoni, Richmond's mayor. For public safety, for our history, for our future, the monuments to the lost cause are coming down. Lawsuits attempted to block removal of the statue. Note to readers, through our standard image toning processes, we de-emphasize 10 instances of the F word that were visible in the photo. It's an extremely rare step for us to take, but it honors our policy not to use that word in stories or display it in photographs.
Cool. So that was all 6, it looks like, right?
Yep.
Why don't we go through from the top then and have each of you vote an in or an out? Or do you all want to sit with it for a little bit longer?
I'm fine. Go ahead.
Good to vote.
Yeah.
Great.
How do we indicate our vote?
Would you like to do it out loud or you want to Slack them in our channel?
Out loud would be best for us.
Yeah.
Good. I'll vote this in just to start it.
I'll also vote this in.
Yeah. I'll vote this in, just to keep it in contention.
I'm going to vote this out.
I'm going to say out as well.
I'll vote this in.
I'm gonna vote this out.
I'm conflicted. I'm gonna say in for now, just so we can discuss it.
I'll vote this out, actually.
Also vote this out.
I vote this out.
I say out as well.
Out as well.
I'll vote this in.
I'm conflicted on this one, so
I am too.
vote in for discussion.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what you all think.
I also wanted to mention, I think there's some room for if anyone felt very strongly that something voted out should have been in, we can discuss, like maybe everyone can have like one or two, to bring back in. So were there any like that we feel like we're missing? Was this all of them?
I think,
This,
and
can
I
I
hope
say?
I'm not,
Yeah.
hope I'm not
Sorry.
putting words in Elizabeth's mouth, but I think the Trump cover, the fold over cover might warrant coming back in for discussion.
I'm just curious to hear what you all think of it, but there's certain things I like about it, but I don't feel I totally understand it necessarily.
Yeah, that's where I'm falling to.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I see the visual kind of echoes, with the pizza boxes, the bullets, and the fingernails, just the graphic, sort of continuity. But I wonder a little bit if that's too much what was on their mind. But anyway.
I'm kind of falling in the same place where I'm like, not only thinking about the images I'm seeing here, but just thinking about visually how journalism has handled covering Trump and especially the insurrection. And it feels, for such a serious issue, almost like these images come off as a little too benign and artistic.
Or provocative for the sake of being provocative.
Yeah, like I get the, the
Yeah.
hand with the nails saying impeach, holding his face, and seeing the bullets. But there's just like such a distance from the sort of like chaos that administration wrought, and especially the like real psychic and physical chaos that was the insurrection, that I'm not reading that in these images, and I would venture to say I haven't really seen that in other images of those events. So in that way, it doesn't really feel successful to me.
But I think you're absolutely spot on about the tone. Is the tone really kind of, I don't know, serious enough, or or
Yeah.
or I don't know, just visceral or inquiring enough. I don't know. But,
Yes.
so.
I'm kind of struggling with the flat parts, because like part of my mind is like I shouldn't be considering those because that's not
Yeah.
part of the cover.
Oh,
Yeah.
And is that, I mean, because you're essentially introducing a visual sequence that's not, if it was meant to be the cover, it should be on the cover, then not on the flap.
And when I like physically use my hands to remove those other two pictures,
right.
I don't know, I feel like I'm just seeing another
Yeah.
photograph of this political figure that I've seen so many times that doesn't really tell me much about him, or his actions, how someone really feels. Like, you really got to look in close to see that this person's nail says Trump 2021. But like, for someone who could be looking at this 15, 20, 30 years down the road, like, what information are they actually getting, not only about this person, but about this moment in time? I'm not getting anything. I'm not learning anything.
The funny thing about this though is if you only look at the front half of the front cover by itself, I almost think it's more impactful.
Yeah, I was actually just going to say too, that I actually think, because I also think this is a really large, not that,
Yeah.
I don't know this affects our judgment of it, but I believe that it's a really large physical object, the first issue of the Curious Society. And so I think you would be able to read, what it says. And I do actually like that image a lot, but
I think what's hurting it for me is it feels very disjointed, and the sequence itself, it to me, it hurts it more than helps it. It's just a little too on the nose and literal. There's not any dimension to it.
Yeah.
Sounds like beyond the sort of like technical aspects of it too, we might be having some issue with the image selections or selection itself, what it adds to the conversation. If I'm reading this correctly.
I think so. I feel like this is something that could have been successful, maybe with different images. But as it's presented in front of me, I don't know.
It's the one with
not
the,
doing it for me.
yeah, it's the one with the pizza boxes that kind of makes it less kind of, I don't know, relevant for me or less on target for me. But
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as far as juxtapositions go, I'm not really sure what it's trying to tell me.
Yeah.
I feel like I know what they were going for. I'm just not sure that they were totally successful in my mind. But anyway, we could weigh it against the other covers. But I appreciate your bringing it back just so we could talk about it.
Yeah.
Agree. I thought that was a nice conversation to be had about it. And I do think it's worth, I mean, it's just kind of a useful thing to know that like these do have different presentations in real life, right? Like the print physical version of it, and that experience is very different from what we're looking at here. I think I feel a little torn about considering this as a whole cover, because I think if I were to hold it in my hands, I would look at the back and the front and the flaps. But but technically speaking too, it's a little murky.
But just in terms of the category, I feel as if every year the judges are going to have to make that decision right on their, they might have a different feeling than what we have about whether to consider everything or just to, because, a lot of the National Geographic covers also, not the ones we're looking at as far as I know, but often have fold outs too. So,
Yeah.
That's a really good point. Right? Like of how subjective all this really becomes.
Right.
Yeah.
It's true. But that's what we have, so.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to trust all of you to, guiding me through this. So.
Great. Well, does it feel like we're comfortable setting this aside for now? Do we want to keep it in conversation with the others?
I'm okay with not including it.
I have to agree.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
If we miss it, we can bring it back.
Right.
So let's talk about these. What brought it to the forefront for you all?
I mean, I love having the juxtaposition of the foreground and the background, because I'm glad Oriana asked to read the caption, because I know, just from my experience with National Geographic, they would never allow them. This is, I guess, a Spanish edition, it's one of the foreign editions. And I know that, the mothership would never allow them to run a manipulated cover. But, that's the sort of effect that I get, is that this is somehow constructed, which I know is not true, but I kind of love that effect, that slightly surreal, just out of body kind of effect that it has. And I really like that.
Yeah, I
and
have
also,
to agree.
Sorry, and also just the fact that I know it's something scientific that they're doing, which gives it a little more gravitas kind of for me. But
Yeah, I think just technically, the positioning of the people in these metallic suits with this really intense red background of lava coming up, and just like this little peak of light on the dirt, it feels really otherworldly and surreal and kind of sci-fi, but like this is on planet Earth. Like this is a volcano that is currently erupting. So I love that, like I know it's rooted in reality in this world we're living in, but it's presented in such a way that it sort of makes you question. And I think also kind of examine just like, yeah, we live on a planet where these things happen, and there are people who are risking life and limb to research them and to expose us to like these parts of our world that we don't necessarily get to engage in on a regular basis. And I think it's just a really beautiful photograph.
It's clean. It's so clean. Like you couldn't ask for a better, composition. And for that volcano to be what it's doing in that exact moment, it's just very clean. I mean, this is like one of those covers where you say, okay, the pictures and the design are in like perfect harmony with each other. You have the negative space for the text, the masthead is playing with the photo. Everything feels very harmonious and together.
Yes.
I just wanted to underscore Shaminder's point too of like taking it as a whole as well, like beyond just the execution of the photo too, but like thinking about the choice to use this as a cover and working with some of the different departments to make it such. Yeah, so thanks for touching on that.
I'd love to hear what you all think, because I have to say, I love this also. I mean, I just think it has such an elusive, kind of slightly mysterious quality that conveys, in a very emotional way, the subject matter. So I like it. But
I'm kind of conflicted on that.
I could tell, and that's why I'm curious to hear what you want to say.
I mean, like, full disclosure, I'm queer.
Yeah.
So I'm like, looking at this cover, I feel like I'm trying to find myself in it and I can't. So that doesn't work for me. And then just thinking about the photographic history of how queer people have been documented, something really rubs me the wrong way about the allusion to secrecy and hiding.
But you don't think that's part of the point, that somehow that, and I don't know because I haven't read the story, but I just assumed that was part of what they were trying to convey, that people were somehow in hiding, or
Well, so it's been the opposite, that like more people have come to recognize over the course of the pandemic that they are queer and have been able to embrace it because of that sort of removal from, fear of reprisal, not being understood, not having to act a certain way in public spaces like work. So yeah, I don't know. I think also too, when we're living in a moment of like very real queer and trans panic, that forces people to hide and to feel like they need to hide certain parts of themselves to live, it feels a little irresponsible to see an image like this on a major magazine coming from a newspaper.
I'm kind of struggling with this one too, but I feel like this is one of those images where a cover got over designed almost like the headline was selected before the photo, and the art director and the photo editor got together to design a cover. I mean, you have the words "queer in quarantine," and that's a quarantine tent with two hands. It's like very literal in one way.
Yeah.
And it seems overly designed, and there's no humanity in it for me. And that's what I'm struggling with. I think it feels like a beautiful still image from like a Sofia Coppola movie or something. Like it's just kind of misty and airy.
Is that
it's
a
beautiful.
bad thing?
No, that's what I'm saying. It's very beautiful aesthetically, but from the storytelling perspective, that's where I'm getting That's where I'm stumbling a little bit, because I'm like, what is this really trying to tell me?
Yeah.
I don't get anything from this cover other than, you know, a photo that's a literal interpretation of a headline.
Yeah. It's also really disembodied too.
Well, that is true, but I guess that doesn't bother me.
Well, you know, again, I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm always like context. Like,
Right.
there's a quarantine. People are sick and ill and dying and are already so far removed from one another. And I don't feel like this sort of distance and removal and disembodiment is actually telling the story of what it feels like to have to navigate that during a quarantine. And I think Shaminder, you really read it right. This really does feel like the title was selected first, and then there was a moment of like, shit, we need a picture.
But again, is that a bad thing? You know, that's my question, because
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, when you work at I mean, you all know, when you work at a magazine or publication, you know, so often that is the way things happen. You know, the editorial staff comes up with, or the editor-in-chief comes up with the concept or the headline, and then, you know, everybody in the visual side is scrambling to try to, you know, render it in some way visually. And
That is so
then it's a
spot
question,
on.
but then it's a question, as you said, of how successful is it? But I like the mystery. And I will say also, just to be completely transparent, that my daughter is queer. Not that that gives me any credibility, because I still have so much education, but I am really sensitive to those issues too. And I don't know, to me, it was kind of a lyrical, just kind of poetic, but kind of mysterious way of suggesting that whole idea of, you know, how much of yourself do you reveal? And does the quarantine make it easier or harder? You know, are there more conditions coming out of the pandemic that force you to, you know, consider your gender identity?
But I have like two things to say, just piggybacking off of that. If I didn't see the headline, in no way, shape, or form would this relate to queer identity in the pandemic to me. It's just two people's hands poking out of a curtain. So like for me, that's the other thing that's happening too, where it's like, this is not really grasping on to this idea of what it's like to be queer during a pandemic in quarantine. There's no visual information whatsoever that is making that relevant or evident to me as a viewer. And then I do want to piggyback on something that you were mentioning about the scramble to make images. I've never ever worked on the side of a signing, so I can't really speak to that. But as someone who has often been put in the position to make images under a scramble, I in many ways don't think that it's a good thing. And this is what I was kind of alluding to at the beginning when I was saying, like, I want to see that the photographer was given enough time, enough information, enough context to successfully execute whatever the assignment was to make the image that really, you know, makes sense to what we're seeing on the magazine cover. And I think this is something that kind of needs to be discussed in our industry at large, especially when we're talking about newspapers and magazines from newspapers. Newspapers are records, and they are historical records. And so we do owe it to the people who are viewing and reading these newspapers and these magazines from newspapers, the time and consideration that it takes for them to be able to think thoughtfully and consider the news that's being put in front of them. And a lot of times I think being in that crush makes it very difficult for everyone to do their jobs to the best of their ability. And, you know, I feel like part of our jobs is helping the general public to decide what's important and what is newsworthy and what is historical and what we need to really spend time thinking thoughtfully about for ourselves. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah. No, that is very true. Definitely time is one of the secret ingredients to making really great work. But it is also true, I will just say that, you know, I'm assuming, and we do subscribe to the post, although I don't always have time to look at it. But you know, we don't know, and I know this may not have any bearing on looking at this particular cover, but I know that the Post has done a lot of really wonderful work about you know, lives during the pandemic, and I don't know specifically about you know, the lives of queer people during the pandemic, but I bet they have. And so it's not like we assume that this is a totality of what they've done. But
Right.
of course, you're right. It's a question of, does it convey this particular idea, you know, successfully? So.
Great.
Yeah.
I also like the way that I interpreted your comments, Elizabeth. Like, I don't think you were saying like that art director, or that like an idea should lead the photo necessarily, but that there are lots of instances in newsrooms where it is a collaborative effort and might start from one place versus another.
Right.
And it's just a reality, you know, I think we all know. That's all.
And I think this is like a really honest conversation to just touch on. And I hope that we keep talking about it, because I know a lot of us have felt it in newsrooms for sure. And it's a constant negotiation, much like the art of photo editing. Yeah, I would be curious, since we've touched on it for this cover as well as the previous one, but like, how do you feel about the idea that one story or one photo needs to tell so much of the story, or like include all of that context? You know, I just wanted to push back on that idea a little bit that was brought up, and then we can move past this cover.
Yeah, I feel with this, like, I can see this idea working, and maybe it worked in a different frame that didn't get considered for the cover. But I do feel like when I'm looking at this specific image as the cover for this, there is something missing. There's something lost in translation. And so for me, I would want a little more information in the image itself to really help connect this idea of the queer quarantine. You know, the subtitle and the title itself. And I do understand it being very literal, but I also think I can only speak for myself, and like I have issues with visual shorthand, where it's like it becomes kind of tropey to me, and it's not enough information, and it feels maybe too obvious. And I'm kind of looking for photographers, art directors, photo editors, picture editors, people who are experts in this work, in distilling the news to us visually. I'm kind of looking to see that expertise come through, and to be challenged as a viewer by what I'm looking at. And so this to me just feels too easy, I think.
I'm still conflicted.
I
mean, I'm seeing it from all the different angles, from like concept, right? Because this is obviously in a studio. It's in my mind definitely driven by the headline, definitely sketched up. It's not like it just happened. And I'm asking myself, as they were creating this concept, what was the message that they were hoping would come across? Because if you're, you know, that's the type of shoot this is, right? You have control over everything. It's not spot news. You didn't just show up.
Yeah.
And so I'm asking myself, what is the storytelling that's happening in this image? And that's where I'm getting stuck on, because it's a beautiful image. It's aesthetically well done. It's technically well done. But does it tell me a story? Does it help invite me in to learn about having an interest in this story, right? What does it tell me? And that's where I'm getting stuck. I'm just getting stuck on, it doesn't really tell me much. It's pretty to look at, but it doesn't tell me anything. And it is a little tropey and cliche to me to be like, oh, let's just have looks like two men's hands holding hands, you know, like, I don't know. What does that tell me exactly?
Hmm.
Then I wonder about the post audience too, right? Because you're speaking to a certain
Yep.
age range, and it's not as normalized for that group as it is for other groups, right? Like this is not surprising for anybody under 40, you know.
It's a really good point.
Mhm.
Unless they're, oh, go ahead, Elizabeth.
Oh, I was just going to say, Emily, to speak to your sort of more generalized question, I do think that many of the most successful covers are the ones that sort of distill an idea into a single image, especially in a very graphic way that's going to stand out. I mean, this is not a newsstand magazine, but for many magazines, that are on the newsstand, they have to be very graphic, which I think this is too.
Sure.
But I guess to me, it does still suggest that idea. And again, maybe it's a measure of how successful or not that it is, that I don't necessarily know exactly what it's suggesting, but it, or what it's trying to convey. But it does suggest to me that idea of, two people who are queer, coming together and trying to grapple with, how much of their relationship to reveal, that idea of secrecy. But it does do it for me in a very non-literal way. So it does make it harder to know exactly what they're trying to say. So
I think that's where I'm getting kind of stuck on the whole like coming out trope. It's, that's what this strikes me as. And
okay.
to me, it's a little dated. It's like, it's not the 80s anymore. Like that's not controversial. And maybe it's a generational thing. I don't know. But, it just, and I grew up in the Bay Area in California, and like it was normal. Like our handyman when I was 8 years old was a gay man. We didn't think of anything of it.
Right. Right.
I think you're right in terms of talking about it as generational. And I think a large part of the reason I kind of recoil from the like coming out of the closet trope is because I grew up in South Florida in the 80s and 90s during very extreme queer and AIDS panic. And not only that, also like, having the influence of evangelical politicians, etc., pushing conversion camps, basically doing a lot of the things that are happening in Florida now. Like that's what I grew up with as a queer kid. So yeah, it's like on the one hand, there is this idea, and unfortunately there has been this not necessarily need, but this idea of like, you have to hide your queer identity and then you come out. And then sometimes given the politics of, where you live, you might have to go back into the closet. But I have to agree with Shaminder where like, I think that that's actually maybe not the right way to be looking at the queer experience. That I think we need to get to a point in talking about queerness where it's not specifically for the lens of someone who isn't queer, like that's kind of what I get when I look at this. Like this is not a cover for me as a queer person. This is a cover for potentially someone who has not had any interactions with queer people. And this is their idea of what coming out looks like, of having to hide in quarantine or like discover yourself in quarantine. I do think it's a really beautiful image. But I also get the feeling too that like if you were to, remove the title, The Queer Quarantine, and put anything else on it, like, online dating or, people not, shacking up and not getting married before living together, like it's too multi-purpose, I think, for me.
It could be a story about interior decorators finding love.
Yeah.
I thought we might move to the next one just to keep the conversation going. We can definitely return to this. I did want to provide a little bit of context. This appears to be like also a digital interactive story that's titled The Queer Quarantine. The online head is 11 photographers and one writer on how the pandemic altered lives in the LGBTQ plus community. And the stories that are part of this package, I believe there are 12 of them, include something about long road to my pandemic wedding, a quote head that says they still don't accept, the elders, prioritizing self-care, violent relationships, the importance of nightlife, how to present yourself, my quiet resistance, nothing would stop him from being himself, challenges and silver linings. And so there's sort of more context to the digital presentation. And I want us to keep in mind that this is judging this based on the magazine cover itself. So I don't know if that sort of helps or gives a little too much information, but I hope that context might be able to inform how we're judging this particular piece along with some of the other ones. Cool. Do you mind if we move to the next one? I just want to shepherd us
Right.
along a little bit, and we can, that was a great spirited discussion on it.
I'm actually getting fumbled up on the altering of the F word on this photo. That's what keeps coming into my mind. Because to me, I know Nat Geo is famous for this, right? Altering a cover, and it's more of a advertising product than a journalistic product, but it is also archival and historical. And so I kind of am stuck on that. I know that the F word is their policy, but also it's reality. Yeah. It's there, and that is going to live on in history as the cover for generations. So I don't know. I'm really getting stuck on that.
Yeah, that was something that
yeah,
piqued my interest too.
I mean, I do think, just again, knowing the geographic audience, that they're, being practical and they're being kind of realistic about what is acceptable. But I totally take your point, because you're absolutely right that it is, altering an image that is going to go down as part of the historical record. But, I'm glad they were transparent about it and admitted it. But,
yeah.
But I can
100%. I'm glad they admitted it. Yeah. But for this issue, it's their annual photo issue. They could have picked any photo. And
it's true.
Why go for one that you have to do that to?
Yeah. That brings up a good point. My confliction about this cover is how many times I saw this picture in 2020. This exact same picture from this exact same viewpoint. And it was frustrating to me then as it is to me now, because I do recognize the absolute historic importance of this specific image. And I can understand how and why it came up so often in 2020, especially when we were talking about the year in pictures or best pictures of the year. But it does make me wonder if there might have been another image about the uprising for Black lives that occurred in 2020 that could have also been considered for the cover. Just because I've seen this one so much. And then to Shaminder's point, something really doesn't sit right with me about the F word being digitally altered out of this, despite the fact that that is policy. It just kind of feels a little weird. I think just in the context of images that I've seen in National Geographic about all kinds of things where maybe some consideration should have been made about not using certain images, not showing certain things, specifically to preserve the dignity of the people and places in front of the camera. So yeah, I'm super conflicted on this one.
I'll just say, and again, you know, I totally understand your attitude about the fact that they didn't include, you know, the F word when it was actually there. But I'll say that for the staff of the magazine, it took a lot of guts to insist upon using this on the cover, because it's not an image that, you know, the publishing side or the financial side, the subscription side would have been happy with. They would have wanted something that was more like a, you know, an animal image, or, you know, an exploration image, or something that was just, you know, more innocuous and less controversial, because it is true that an image like this for their audience is not going to please everyone, you know. So again, you know, for most people in the, you know, larger world, it may seem, you know, just accepted and tame, you know, to use an image that was so circulated. But for the Geographic and for their audience, it was a bold and move, which I think must have involved a lot of, you know, resolve to get that on the cover. So just to put it in context.
That is a really good point.
Yeah.
I think that's the part of what we were talking about at the beginning of when you have to negotiate all the other stuff that,
Right.
all the other stuff of photo editing, right? That people never see.
Right, exactly.
I did want to just ask a question point blank, which is that, you know, generally, and according to actually our NPPA technical guidelines and ethics, you know, things like multiple exposures, panoramas, like stitched photos, photos that are altered or manipulated during post-processing, except for by basic toning, contrast, or by cropping, like that's not accepted. So how does this crew feel about even this reaching the bar of entry for us? I know there was transparency on the taking out of the F word.
Yeah, that's the main thing that tripped me up right away, because I think I'm a little more of a purist, maybe. I don't know what the word for it would be, but the first thought I had was like, well, if it had the F word and that's not okay, why not use a different photo? That's kind of what I keep going back to.
Yeah. And I do, this one is hard. I'm like I'm trying to be careful about not coming off as like the group cynic, because that is very easy for me.
That's an important role too.
But
We could trade, we could take turns.
Okay.
Yes.
But I'm also kind of like not buying this idea that it was brave to put this on the cover.
Oh,
Like, it's 2020. There was a pandemic. We had an aspiring dictator as president, and there were uprisings. That's all that happened in that year. So you got 3 things to pick from in terms of what to put on the cover, right? So it's a little difficult for me thinking about a magazine that is of historic record, feeling like it's a brave thing to essentially put what has been news for the entirety of a year on its cover. You could not ignore this. This was the largest uprising that happened in the United States of America ever. Everywhere you went in the country, you were having to face the fact that this is a racist country and that we had a basically neo-segregationist president pushing all sorts of horrendous ideas about how the government should work, who it should punish, who should have rights, who should be able to live. You could not get away from that. So to that point, I really do have a hard time with the F word being edited out of this. Because I think also too, the thing to think about is like, part of what makes this monument so powerful is not just the symbolism of having graffiti, just any kind of graffiti on top of what is a monument to Confederacy. So not only just, you know, a historic moment in America's history, but also to a specific concept that has haunted this country forever that we don't talk about. And part of the reason this monument got defaced was because this was the anger and the grief of people. And this was a way for them to put that somewhere so it could be seen and heard finally. So to then remove instances of what that grief and anger looks like, because the F word is a bad word, is just weird. It's like, just pick another picture altogether.
Mhm. I totally get what you're saying, and I don't argue at all against the removal of the F word, but I'm just saying, you know, within the context of knowing what the staff had to go through internally, you know, not, it's like in the larger world, sure, a lot of people, you know, at many other publications would totally, you know, understand why it would make sense to run this kind of image, but at Geographic, you know, they would have gotten a lot less pushback if they had used something from the pandemic, you know, some medical, you know, scene or something. But to have something like this, I think, and again, I'm not arguing that that's what should make this necessarily even stay in contention. I'm just saying that I just know, you know, that the behind the scenes context of what they had to go through at the magazine, I could just bet that they had a big battle to get this on the cover. But again, you know, it's kind of my speculation just from having worked there before.
I wanted to see, is there any like note that they included to the submission about like process or decision or anything like that? And maybe that's just something to take away from this, is like potentially encouraging folks to include stuff like that to be part of the contention. Because I think it's like, Elizabeth, you've had so much experience there, so you can probably speak very clearly to your time there. But none of us were in the room when it happened, I believe,
Right.
when that decision was made, or the
Right.
series of conversations leading up to that point. But yeah, Julian or Lizzie, do you happen to see any, was there anything further included or not? Was it just what we read?
There is a field for that, right? Like where people can add extra information.
It might be in the image description field. So if that's all there was earlier, unfortunately, it might not be.
No, I do believe everything I read was everything I was provided with.
Okay. Thank
Yes.
you.
I feel like I am less conflicted about this one than I was with the last one. This one feels very cut and dry to me. Just because like the technical issue of taking out the F word. I actually don't even know if this is the best photo that represents Black Lives Matter to me, or like what happened with George Floyd. So I don't know. I'm not really in love with this one.
I think that's what I'm trying to get at with like having seen this image so many times. You know, like as a symbol, because this is something that we like to do in this country. We like to take events that happen, pick a visual symbol for it, and that's the visual shorthand that we use to talk about it. But there was definitely a much more powerful picture that really illustrated what it looked like for the entire country to be an uprising for over 10 months. This is, to me, not that image.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, you know, we should move on just so we're not stuck for a long time, because, you know, I definitely am fine with, you know, going with what you're both saying, because I can totally understand it. So.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was actually wondering, what do we think about taking a little break and coming back to this? We have a few options here where we can either finalize each category and keep going, which actually is my preference, or there could be some categories where we choose to come back to, like tomorrow, for example.
No, but I think we're ready to vote now, don't you think? I mean, just
Okay.
given the discussion that we've had.
Great. Okay. No need to drag it on any longer then.
Yeah. I mean, I just feel bad because I feel like I'm the one who's always trying to keep things in, and I don't mean to slow down the process, but I just like to hear what people have to say.
I mean, I think that's,
Yeah.
as a judge, the discussion is kind of like the The
It's the
photo
best
geek in
part.
me is like, let's do that.
I know, it's true. It's what I live for. But
This is what I miss. I don't get this every day. So thank
yes,
you.
exactly. Exactly.
Awesome. So now that we've discussed all three of these on their own, what are you all thinking in context? Is there any that should be, you feel, voted out to begin with? And then we can start assigning any placements or on.
I mean, as a person who likes all three of them, I'll just say it seems to me, and you guys please, confirm that the first cover is the one that everyone feels more open to. Is that correct?
Agreed, yeah.
I would agree.
Okay. So,
And the second and the third won't be awarded at all. Is that where we stand?
it's
That's
fine
what
with
I'm
me if the
wondering.
other judges feel that way.
So we can do first, second, third, and honorable mentions, right? Or we could
Mhm.
just do first and nothing else.
Yep. Or you could even do honorable mention and nothing else. Or
Hmm.
frankly, you can choose to not award anything.
So
It's
much
really
power.
flexible.
Too much choice.
Okay, I don't want to be that person, but can we just look at the entire sixth grid again, just briefly?
Yeah,
I just want to
I
make
think
sure we
that's
didn't.
fair.
I kind of want to hear people's thoughts on the Exodus cover.
I wanted to talk about that one too.
Oh, okay.
Part of me was like, let's keep it going, but a part of me was like, I really got to go back to this one for a second.
Tell us why, Shminder.
This one stood out to me the first time. I mean, it's like one of our only covers has a person on it, for one. I feel like I could connect to somebody. It's a strong story from the description that we got. Like there's actual, a journalistic, strong, important story that you should pay attention to that a lot of people don't know about. So from that perspective, it is telling you something that you should know, right? So I always think there's two categories of stories. There's like the want to know and the need to knows. And this to me is like a need to know, need to pay attention to this. And this photo draws me in and says, wait, what's happening there? I want to read this. And so as a cover, it does its job. So yeah, I'm just going back to that. I'm just like, it does what it's supposed to do, right? Draw me in and make me want to learn more.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. Looking at this, that it just immediately caught my attention and made me curious. And also just from reading the text around it, that I think out of a majority of the covers we were looking at, I felt like this was most successful because the image felt like it made more sense to the title and the supporting text. And yeah, I think, when you see someone on the cover of something, you're immediately drawn into like what is going on with that other human, what's their story, what's happening with them.
There's also like a respect to it as well. It doesn't feel cliche to me or trope. It's not poverty porn. Like it feels very respectful.
Yeah, I was drawn to that too. I think like knowing that this is about mass migration in Latin America, knowing that this is a woman attending a funeral for a loved one, it felt like there was a lot of respect and dignity in that experience, that it captured like this vulnerability, but it didn't, I don't know how to say
like it
this,
doesn't try to manipulate you.
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. Like I don't feel like I am being called to pity this person.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm being called to want to know more about their experience and how they are navigating and surviving that experience. And that can be a really difficult thing to accomplish when it comes to migration and immigration stories. I think this one's really beautiful.
Well, I have to say that, and I do like this body of work because I have seen it before, but I was just put off by the fact that it just looks so old fashioned, honestly. I just was not drawn to it at all. I do agree that there's a real dignity to her face, and graphically, I think it works well, and it always is powerful to have a person on the cover. But I don't know, I just was not interested in engaging at all. I took one look and it just felt like, I don't know, some ad from, UNICEF, or, it just,
Yeah.
there was something about the convention of it that just felt so outdated to me. But I totally understand, it has that sort of classic nobility kind of, but
Does
I
it
wasn't
feel a
drawn to it.
little
I
like
see what you're saying.
expected or on the nose for you? Or
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's definitely part of it. I just, I looked at it, my eye almost just bounced off of it because it just seems so familiar.
Mm.
But, again, just my reaction. I was just much more drawn into pretty much all the other covers that we talked about, but just visually, too. So, and I really like Nicola's work a lot, but somehow this didn't do it for me.
All right. I mean, I think this is kind of the beauty of bringing your different perspectives together, but also the challenge. So let's see, if we were to bring this back into contention, it sounds like a couple, Oriana.
Should we do a yay nay real quick?
Oh,
And then
I was
you-
gonna say, like, I just
Okay.
wanted to discuss it. I actually
Okay,
kind of agree with Elizabeth and don't think it should be in contention.
okay, let's do
I
a
can agree with
yay,
you
nay.
guys.
Okay, 3 nays then. Let's jump back to the 3 we had, unless there were any others you wanted to talk about. I think we're still looking at the full set. But I think we know which 3 we're looking at,
Yeah.
right? So do you 3 feel comfortable voting on placement, or let me think of other ways we could do this. We could also, take away any of the ones that you feel strongly won't be placed at all.
I mean, just given our discussion, I'm happy just rewarding the first cover if the other judges agree. But what that should be, I leave kind of, up to
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah.
So,
I
yeah.
feel like I know what I would do. I don't know
Okay,
if everyone
great.
else feels the same.
Well, tell
Great.
us.
I don't want to influence you guys. Do you guys have an idea what you guys like, or
Yeah.
what ranking you're thinking?
Yeah.
I could
Okay.
also have you like DM me, but I think, I don't mind doing it blind or all together. I think once we start talking about it, feelings will be obvious, and I don't think any of you are too shy to share at the same time.
Yeah.
But
All
if
right,
it's more
I'll throw
comfortable,
out. No, I'll throw
Okay.
out. I just didn't want to sway people. So if everyone's kind of feeling like you know what you want already, then I'll go ahead and share.
Okay.
All right. So I'm thinking I would do first place for the volcano, and I would do an honorable mention for the queer quarantine, and I would not award the 2020 cover.
Mm.
Oh, that's interesting.
So
I'm
the way
just-
oh,
Yeah, I'm just surprised you wanted to award the queer quarantine cover because I didn't think you were that into it, but
I'm a complex fella. Well, I said honorable mention. I think it's worth, just the discussion we had around it. That's how you know a cover's doing something right.
yeah.
So I think it merits an honorable mention, but I don't think it merits a podium or whatever else metaphor we want to use.
Right. What do you think, Oriana?
So I don't think any of these merits podium.
Wow.
I think the volcano cover is an honorable mention,
Okay.
and the other 2, nothing.
I mean, based on what we were saying before, I'm actually fine with giving the volcano cover either of, believe it or not, either a first or an honorable mention and dropping the other 2. But But I'm also fine, with either of what you propose. So I don't feel so strongly about it. And I want to save my ammunition for later. I know I'm going to feel strongly about something coming up.
I can second that, Elizabeth. I can go with your suggestion.
Mhm.
All right.
Great. And sorry, Julian and Lizzie, were you taking notes on that or was I supposed to?
So just to clarify, you want to give an honorable mention to the National Geographic cover, but not the others.
The first geographic cover, the foreign edition with the volcano.
Okay. Sounds like a quorum.
Should we remove those stars so there's no confusion?
So the way the starring system works, if we do 2 stars, it's an honorable mention. And since we go
Oh,
up
I
to
see.
5 stars, 5 stars would be first place, 4 stars would be second place, third is 3 stars, and then honorable mention is 2. 1 is just if we're keeping it in contention as we go through. It's up to you if you want to remove them completely.
I mean, maybe it doesn't hurt to keep the 1 stars on things that we made that cut to, but whatever you all think. So.
That system makes sense as long as there's clarity around it.
Right.
Agreed.
And consistent, yeah.
I'm almost tempted to make Emily Keegan jump in on this long contracted discussion, but I think we will just move on to the next one after this. But